The piece was on a blog called Noah's Awakening. I can't remember how I found it, probably a link in one of the newsletters I subscribe to, the kind that aggregate content for middle-aged women who spend too much time online looking for answers to questions they can't articulate. The author wrote about the way women our age, women in their late 40s and 50s, tend to confuse intensity with intimacy and dependency with love, about how the men who trigger that confusion are often the ones who benefit most from our uncertainty, about the way a certain kind of man cultivates need in a woman, not because he wants her to be whole, but because wholeness is a threat to his influence. They don't love you, the author wrote. They love the version of yourself you become when you're with them, the one who needs them, the one who can't quite function without the next contact, the next visit, the next confirmation that you matter to someone. They cultivate that need because it keeps you close, not because they want you to be whole, because they want you to be incomplete. I read that paragraph 3 times. I read it until the words lost their meaning, and then found it again, sharper. I read it until it stopped being someone else's observation and started being a description of my own life of the past 20 years, of every choice I'd made, of the architecture of dependency I'd built around a man who had never once, in all that time, asked me to be more than I was. I read it again the next morning, and the morning after that, and slowly, over the course of several weeks, I began to understand something I had been refusing to understand for 20 years. Here is what I understood. Daniel Harper had never loved me, not in the way I needed to be loved, not in the way that builds someone up, that makes them more than they were, that challenges them to grow into the best version of themselves. What Daniel had loved was what I represented to him, the certainty of being desired, the comfort of being chosen, the proof that he was the kind of man who could make a woman wait 15 years for him without ever fully committing. He loved the power, and I had given it to him freely, because I didn't know how to want anything else. Number 9, Chapter 21. The truth is that I have never been able to explain Daniel Harper to myself in terms that don't involve a substantial amount of self-deception. He was my first thought in the morning and my last thought at night. He knew things about me that no one else knew: the texture of my grief after my mother's death, the specific humiliation of losing my savings to a fraud, the way I cried during commercials about dogs because they reminded me of the golden retriever I'd had as a child and lost to old age when I was 30. He had seen me at my most broken and had not run, but he had also, in the most quiet and methodical way, made sure I stayed broken. He dismissed my ambitions. He dismissed Marcus Chen with a contempt that had nothing to do with Marcus's competence and everything to do with the fact that Marcus represented an alternative to Daniel's gravity. He told me not to apply for the promotion, not because he knew it was a bad opportunity, but because a woman who is promoted is a woman with something else to focus on, and what Daniel Harper needed was a woman with nothing else to focus on. He needed me incomplete, and I had let him need that because incompleteness felt like the price of admission to a version of love I had been chasing since I was 22 years old. It was not love. I know that now. It was the architecture of dependency, a structure built over years, brick by brick, by a man who understood that the most effective way to keep someone is to make them feel like they cannot survive without you. Number. Chapter 22. I still see Daniel. Not as often. We've tapered to 3, sometimes 2 visits a year. He calls it a natural evolution. I don't call it anything. I just show up when he asks, and I leave when I have to. And in between, I try not to think too hard about what it means that I'm still doing this at 52. After everything, he texts me before my birthday. I text him on major holidays. He knows about my blood pressure appointment on Monday. I know about his daughter's wedding in June. We are, in the way that 2 people who have shared something complicated and unwieldy become a part of each other's permanent landscape. Marcus Chen got promoted to deputy director last spring. He didn't get it because of me. I want to be clear about that. I want to be clear that I never acted on what I felt. Never crossed the line from colleague to something more. Never put either of us in a position where we'd have to reckon with what might have been. He got it because he's genuinely excellent at his job, and because someone on the selection committee finally recognized that. But when I saw his name in the announcement email, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. Not for him exactly, for myself. For the part of me that had recognized something real in Marcus Chen, something solid and actual and untainted by the murky history I carried with Daniel, even if I'd been too entangled to act on it. I think about what might have happened if I'd walked out of that hotel room in Riverside in 2019. If I'd filed the application for the promotion. If I'd called Marcus Chen instead of lying in Daniel's bed talking about what a nice guy he was. I think about those versions of Catherine Miller. I wonder if they're happy. Number. Chapter 23. I think about my mother sometimes. The last thing she said to me. Find someone, Catherine. I've been trying to figure out what she meant. I've been trying to decide whether Daniel Harper counts, whether the man who held me in that hotel room in November, who never once asked for anything he wasn't owed, who gave me his coat when I was cold, and his time when I was grieving, whether he counts as the someone she was talking about. I don't think he does, but I also don't think she was talking about Marcus Chen or about any man I might meet at this point in my life. I think she was talking about a version of myself I haven't found yet. The one who doesn't need to be crossed a room for. The one who sits in the silence of her own apartment and doesn't reach for the phone to text someone who makes her feel small. The one who knows, in her bones, that she is enough, not because someone told her so, but because she's done the work of proving it to herself. The one who is enough, all by herself. I'm not there yet. I'm not sure I'll ever fully arrive. But I'm closer than I was at 47, lying in a hotel room in Riverside with Daniel Harper's hands on me and the certainty in my chest that this was the best I was ever going to get. It wasn't. It isn't. And the distance between what I believed then and what I know now is the entire rest of my life. I think about the women in my graduate cohort, Sandra, and her wealthy husband, Jennifer, who divorced twice and now teaches yoga in Sedona, Michelle, who lost her husband to cancer at 45 and has spent a decade since traveling to every continent except Antarctica. I think about how all of us, in our different ways, have spent the years since our 20s trying to figure out what love is supposed to look like when you're a woman of a certain age, when your body has changed and your options have narrowed, and the men who once looked at you with hunger now look through you like your furniture. The world tells us our value is tied to our beauty, our youth, our ability to be desired. And for most of my life, I believed it. I measured myself against that standard and found myself wanting, and I compensated by seeking out the attention of a man who made me feel, for a few hours at a time, like I was worth something. But here's what I've learned in the years since I stopped waiting for Daniel Harper to change. The standard is a lie. The measuring is a trap. And the attention of a man who only wants you when you're small is not a compliment, it's a cage. I am not furniture. I am not a measure of my desirability. I am a woman who survived her mother's death and her sister's silence and a divorce and a financial collapse and 20 years of loving someone who could not love her back the way she needed. And I am still here. Still standing, still becoming. That has to count for something. Love quiet, forbidden midlife romance? Subscribe to Noah's Awakening for more slow burn stories. Epilogue. What remains? Daniel and I are still in each other's lives. I want to be honest about that, because this story doesn't end the way the movies tell you it should. There is no dramatic confrontation, no final door-slamming exit. No moment where I stand in the rain and declare myself free. The truth is more mundane and more true. We still meet, 3 times a year, sometimes less. He texted me before my birthday. I text him on major holidays. He knows about my blood pressure appointment on Monday. I know about his daughter's wedding in June. We are, in the way that two people who have shared something complicated and unwieldy become a part of each other's permanent landscape. And I still read Noah's Awakening. I still send articles to the group chat with the women from my graduate cohort, the ones who married and divorced and remarried and are now, like me, somewhere on the far side of 50, still looking for something they can't quite name. We don't talk about Daniel. We don't talk about Kevin. We talk about our children, our parents, our health scares, our small victories. We talk about whether any of it was worth it. Last week, one of them, Sandra, the woman whose birthday party had started all of this, sent a message. Do you ever regret it? Any of it? I thought about it for a long time. I thought about the bar in February. I thought about the hotel room where I cried and he held me. I thought about the promotion I didn't get and the money I lost and the man I loved in the way that you love someone when you don't yet know that love is supposed to feel like more than survival. I wrote back, I regret the years I spent mistaking need for love. I don't regret when I became in those years. She was doing the best she could with what she had. It's not a satisfying ending. It's not the kind of ending you'd put in a story, but it's true, and at 52, I've decided that truth is the only thing worth aiming for. Here is another truth. I am afraid that I will spend the rest of my life alone, that the years with Daniel have so thoroughly broken something in me that I will never be able to love someone the way I want to love openly, without conditions, without the shadow of what I mistook for love hanging over every good thing that comes next. I am afraid that Marcus Chen will remain a near miss, a reminder of what I couldn't have, and that I will spend my 50s and 60s and beyond comparing every man I meet to a version of him that I invented in my own mind. I am afraid that I wasted my youth on the wrong man, that by the time I understood what love was supposed to look like, I had already given away the best years of my life to someone who saw me as a possession, not a person. But fear is not fact, and regret is not prophecy. And the woman I am becoming is not the same woman who walked into that ballroom at 22 and felt her heart stop when Daniel Harper crossed the room to meet her. I have outgrown him, not because I decided to, but because the version of myself that needed him no longer exists. And in the space where that need used to live, something else is growing, something quieter, something that doesn't require me to be small in order to be loved. I don't know what it is yet, but I think it might be the beginning of something I haven't felt before, the first faint stirrings of self-love, the tentative, terrifying, extraordinary recognition that I am worth the effort of saving. That's what my mother was talking about, I think. That's who she meant when she said times find someone. She meant find the person you are when you're not performing for anyone else. Find the woman who exists when no one is watching. Find the Catherine who doesn't need a man's attention to know her own worth. I'm still looking, but I'm getting closer. The last time I saw Daniel 3 months ago at a hotel in Riverside, the same city where everything started and ended and started again, he looked at me across the room and said, "You're different." "How so?" I asked. "You don't need me the way you used to." He said it like it was a loss, like the fact that I was no longer dependent on his attention was a wound he was only now discovering. And I looked at him, this man who had shaped so much of my life, who had taken so much from me, who had given me back only the version of myself that served his needs, and I said, "No, I don't." He nodded. He didn't say anything else, and we spent the rest of that evening the way we always did in a hotel room, in silence, in the particular intimacy of two people who have shared something they can never fully share with anyone else. But it was different this time. For the first time, I left the room as myself, not as Catherine the woman who needed Daniel Harper, not as Catherine the broken one, Just as Catherine, the woman I am still learning to be, the woman I am still becoming, the woman who finally, after 52 years, understands that she was always enough. She just had to find it in herself to believe it. Number chapter 24. A week before my 53rd birthday, I got a text from Daniel. "Happy early birthday, Bobe. I was thinking about you." I read the message. I looked at the word Bobe, the same word he'd used when I was 22, when I was 30, when I was 45, when I was lying on a cold street in February being taken against my will. The same word that had always meant, "You are mine." I didn't respond. The next day, I filed an application for a training program at the state office, a 6-month leadership development initiative for mid-career public servants. It was competitive. It would mean traveling to the capital once a month for workshops. It would mean new challenges, new people, new possibilities. It would mean being too busy to wait by my phone for Daniel Harper's text messages. Lorraine Bell, my director, the same director who'd once expressed distant confidence in my abilities, called me into her office to discuss the application. "Catherine," she said, "this is impressive. Why haven't you applied for something like this before?" I thought about the question. I thought about all the years I'd spent believing I wasn't good enough, that the best days were behind me, that the only thing left was to manage my decline as gracefully as possible. "I think I was waiting," I said, "for permission." "From whom?" "From myself, I think." Lorraine looked at me for a long moment, and then she smiled, a real smile, the kind that reaches the eyes, and she said, "Permission granted. Number. Final chapter. I need to tell you something else, something I haven't mentioned yet because I wasn't sure it belonged in a story about a woman and the man who broke her. But looking back, I think it's the most important thing I have to say. I should tell you that I still have moments. Moments where I pick up my phone and almost text Daniel. Moments where I'm lying in bed at 3 in the morning and the old pull is so strong I can feel it in my chest like a physical ache. Moments where I wonder if I'm making a mistake, if the life I'm building is just another form of running away, if the independence I'm claiming is just loneliness dressed up in better clothes. These moments don't mean I'm on the wrong path. They're just what it feels like to unlearn something you've known for 20 years. The way your body still reaches for the light switch in a room you moved out of years ago. The way your hand still goes to your phone when you hear a notification, even if the notification is from no one who matters anymore. I don't answer those moments with Daniel. I don't text him back. I don't book a hotel room in Riverside. I sit with them instead, the way you sit with pain that you know is temporary, even though it doesn't feel that way in the moment. I remind myself what I know now, which is that the ache is not love, the longing is not connection, the electricity of his attention is not the same thing as being seen. And then I get up and I make coffee, and I go to work and I do the things that a woman does when she is building a life from the ruins of the one she thought she was living. I need to tell you something else. Something I haven't mentioned yet because I wasn't sure it belonged in a story about a woman and the man who broke her. But looking back, I think it's the most important thing I have to say. 3 months after Patricia Odom got the promotion, 3 months after I sat in that hotel room in Riverside and let Daniel Harper tell me what to do with my career, I ran into Marcus Chen at an interagency meeting in the Effusion 69ers, Capital, a quarterly thing. The kind of event I usually dreaded, where bureaucrats gather in a conference room and talk about things that will never meaningfully affect anyone's life. But this time was different. Marcus was there. He sat across the room from me during the morning sessions, and I felt his eyes on me the same way I had felt Daniel's all those years, except this time, the feeling was different. With Daniel, the feeling had always been some combination of electric and terrifying. With Marcus, it was something quieter, something that felt dangerously like peace. During the coffee break, he came over to where I was standing. "Catherine," he said, "it's good to see you." "You too, Marcus." I heard about the supervisory position at your agency, that it went to someone else. I felt my face go cold. I hadn't told anyone about that. Not Marcus, not my sister, not anyone. The only person who knew was Daniel. How did you hear about that? He shrugged. People talk. HUD and your agency share a lot of same professional circles. Word gets around. He paused. I'm sorry. I know you must have been hoping for it. I didn't know what to say. I stood there with my coffee cup in my hand and my chest tight, and the sudden, overwhelming sense that I'd been living in a small, dark room for so long that I'd forgotten there was such a thing as daylight. Can I tell you something? I said. Honestly? Of course. I didn't apply. He looked at me for a long moment, and then, instead of asking why, instead of probing, instead of offering advice, instead of doing any of the things that most people would do, he just nodded and said, I understand. Sometimes we don't apply for things because we're not ready for them yet, and that's okay. Not ready, not incapable, not unworthy, just not ready. I thanked him. I went back to my seat, and I spent the rest of that conference thinking about the difference between the way Daniel Harper had responded to my ambition and the way Marcus Chen had just responded, the difference between a man who needed me to be small and a man who was willing to wait until I was ready to be big. I think about that conversation a lot. I think about how Marcus didn't try to fix it or explain it or make me feel bad about it. He just acknowledged it. He met me where I was, and he let it be what it was. This is not a small thing. This is not a given. Most people, most men, in my experience, can't resist the urge to problem solve. When a woman shares something painful, they immediately start thinking about solutions, about what she should have done differently, about how they would have handled it better. They turn our vulnerability into a coaching opportunity, our pain into a demonstration of their own wisdom. Daniel was like that. He never just listened. He always had an opinion, a correction, a piece of advice that was really just another way of telling me that he knew better and I should defer. Even when he was comforting me, especially when he was comforting me, there was an undercurrent of superiority. The sense that he was holding me together because I couldn't hold myself together, and that this was a form of power, not just care. Marcus didn't do that. Marcus just sat with it, and in the sitting with, he gave me something that Daniel never could, the experience of being trusted, trusted to know my own mind, trusted to make my own mistakes, trusted to figure out when I was ready, rather than being pushed into readiness by someone else's impatience. It's a small thing. It's also everything. Daniel Harper was not the man who was going to save me. Neither was Marcus Chen. Neither was my mother. God knows. Because everyone leaves eventually. And the ones who stay do it in the form of memory, which is both more and less than you need. What I know now, what it took me 15 years and 1,000 hotel rooms to understand, is that the man who was going to save me was always supposed to be me. I just didn't have the language for it when I was younger. I didn't have the age, or the damage, or the hard-won understanding of what it actually costs to keep choosing the wrong person because the right person felt too much like a risk. It is a risk. Everything worth having is. But I'm 52. I've survived worse. I've survived my mother's death and my sister's silence and a divorce and a financial collapse and a man who took something I didn't want to give and called it love. And somewhere in the next 10 or 20 years, however long I have, I intend to find out what it feels like to be the someone my mother was talking about. Until then, I'll be here, reading Noah's Awakening, drinking wine I shouldn't be drinking, thinking about Marcus Chen and promotions I didn't get, and a version of Catherine Miller who, even now, even at the far edge of everything, is still very much in progress, still very much becoming. Love quiet, forbidden midlife romance. Subscribe to Noah's Awakening for more slow burn stories. The end.